Everything old is new again. America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, bark like a dog for me.
Where's the goodies? Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
In a past life, he was himself. He gave his father the talk. He is the most interesting man in the world.
Welcome to Everything Old is New again. This is Douglas Viviani with the ever-inquisitive David Cohen.
Yes.
Why did I play that most interesting man in the world clip? Isn't that interesting?
Yes,
unto
because
itself?
Because I think we have a guest on with us that could qualify for the most interesting man in the world.
Yes, they did. If you notice, they changed from that older gentleman to the younger character, and
I didn't like
I
that.
think they made a mistake. I think what they should have done was ask this gentleman, because he is, in my world, the most interesting man in the world. I've seen him at Star Trek convention in Vegas to talk about, he's been in 50 movies, countless television shows, including RoboCop, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, Across the Eighth Dimension, Star Trek Into Darkness, which we know is one of my favorites, 24, Fringe, Sons of Anarchy, among many others. It was interesting because at the height of his acting career in 2014, he took a turn and obtained, believe it or not, a PhD in Italian Renaissance art history from UCLA. I'm ready to go talk about him, but it's just, we got to continue.
Are we ever going to get to the introduction or
He's
what?
Directed so many TV shows. He's directed Monk, Hawaii Five-0, Sons of Anarchy, Sleepy Hollow, and now can be seen appearing in front of and behind the camera for TNT's The Last Ship. Who am I talking about?
I forget already.
Peter Weller. Welcome, Peter. Thank you for coming on board.
Welcome, Peter.
Yeah, that's a great intro, man. Not to toot one's own horn, but Shy McBride, a great actor and a very funny guy, the regular on Hawaii Five-0. Because he can do 40 different musical accents of any sort of cultural denomination in the world, and he calls me the world's most interesting guy, and I feel at the same time humbled and honored when he does that. So
well, he does it for a reason, and it's just something that came to my mind, and that we're probably like 5,000 miles apart because he's in Hawaii and we're broadcasting from New York, but we meet on that topic and agree with that, and we're going to dive into that in a few sections of our show here, and Everything Old is New again. I did want to talk first about your latest project just for a moment, and one of your latest projects. You have a number of them called The Last Ship. It's let's see, it's going into its fourth season and was renewed for its fifth even already. You're on board, I believe, for the fourth, for both, for acting and directing, correct? And you're on as
yes, I'm playing the season arc antagonist in the fourth season and directing two, including the finale. And then immediately I take a break. I go direct for Greer Shepard and Hunt Baldwin and John Coveney. Another great series based on a series of books, Longmire. Because Last Ship is based on is 9 books about a pandemic apocalypse, and Longmire has been also hitting its sixth season, and it's based on a series of books too about a sheriff, modern day sheriff who's sort of out of time, played by the great Rob Taylor, Australian actor. And so I go jump over do that, and then I come back and I direct 3 back to back of season 5 of The Last Ship. So I'm here doing The Last Ship and then Longmire with a little break to go to Italy until August. So it's great to be in L.A. As much as I love directing and acting and traveling, and I'm sort of, if you're not a vagabond in this business, you're done. But everybody sort of relishes the gigs that keep you in Los Angeles, next to your family and your friends.
And that's interesting. The Last Ship, which is basically taking place on board a battleship in the ocean, although you do visit locations, is taking place just in L.A. itself. I mean, that's the magic of Hollywood, I guess. But are there any on-location shoots in those?
Yeah. The unseen sponsor of it, or the scene sponsor of it, the obvious sponsor of it is the United States Navy, and so we shoot on a destroyer in San Diego every year. I mean, in the mid-season, we'll go down and do all of the scenes that we need on the exterior of that destroyer, and then at the end of the season, we'll do the same thing. So a lot of it is on a United States Navy destroyer in San Diego. And all of the the technical advisors are operable and operating Navy officers. You know, the SEAL team guys are SEAL team. The underwater demo guys are underwater demo. The helicopter people are and they're all non-retired functioning, servicing United States Navy officers and non-coms. So
wow.
And this
great to be around.
Yeah, I mean, this Nathan James is the name of the ship, right? I mean, it's this destroyer, right. And it's basically, in the way I'm looking at it, is sort of a character unto itself, because you don't see other projects at all taking place on a destroyer, and so that in of itself is something that's really kind of cool to dive into and live in that world, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm a military brat. I grew up. My father had two lives. The first life, he was an Army intelligence pilot, and he was one of the LBJ's military pilots. And he was a pilot during the Cold War in Korea and World War II and Vietnam. And so subsequently, I grew up in the milieu of battle-ready armed forces. And so, it's an interesting deal about being on a Navy ship. You're shooting on a Navy ship. The whole sets are recreated of the interior of a destroyer, and they're recreated exactly as the destroyer is, and the Navy is watching us all the time to make sure that we're absolutely on the game. We're not fudging anything. I mean, they'll let us fudge the drama, of course, but the specifics of how the Navy works, we got to be really on our P's and Q's. And subsequently, that's fun. It's one thing to do Star Trek where you could just make it up and go crazy because it's the future, and to jump from that to the reality right now. The contemporary reality of the United States Navy is really a trip. At first you feel micromanaged, but after a while, after 3 years with this thing, I think it's really great to work under the auspices of the United States Navy, or any armed forces for that matter. Because as liberal as I am, I'm a total, earringed ex-hippie liberal. I still support the armed forces and really am amazed at what they do for us in terms of service and protection. So
absolutely, it brings a reality to a somewhat possible situation, as you said, where there's a pandemic and lots of the world is either dead
could
or
happen
sick.
any time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Douglas David could happen any moment. I don't want to sound like the alarmists, because there's got so many of them now, who believe that you got to get a machine gun, get your potatoes in the backyard, hide your bullion, and batten down the hatches, which I think is stupid, because if that happens, who cares about bullion and potatoes? But a pandemic, yeah, that could happen. I mean,
and then it's a total breakdown of society, and it is analogous in some ways to Walking Dead and some of these shows we're seeing where the societal norms are or are not breaking down. And I guess that's some of your character, this Dr. Paul Velik. He's got some genetic modification and plant biotechnology. I mean, this guy's involved in the science of it, but what does he want to take advantage of? I don't want to give the story away, but what does he want to take advantage of everybody based on his knowledge, or where are we going with that?
Well, no, I mean, my character Paul Velik is if you could combine a guy between Einstein and Noam Chomsky and I don't know, the guy who invented biotechnology. I forget his name, Carl. What's his name? But anyway, all three of those guys are doing the right thing at this particular time in the seasons. The pandemic has passed, but now because of the dislodging of order and the panic, people are running out of food. Because nobody's minding the farms.
Right.
And so it's got to be biologically engineered food, and this guy Velik, essentially there's seeds that we can plant and use and create food, but it's all got to be done under the auspices of this guy Velik, who seems to be, he sees it as, if you don't trust me, it's like Julius Caesar walking into Rome in 59 BC. Look, this place is a mess, and you got to follow me, or we're all going to die.
Well, we'll pick up
that's essentially Velik's deal.
Excellent. We'll pick that up with Peter Well on Everything Old is New Again, talking about The Last Ship and some other topics right after this.
Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. We are here with what would you say, the most interesting man in the world?
Fan of the man of the world.
David Cohen we're talking about, of course.
Hey!
And also Dr. Peter Weller's with us. Just want to let you know that we have recorded this interview with Peter Weller a little bit in advance, so we're going to interject our comments here and there and during the editing process here to put this together. It's the first time we've done this. Just want to let you know that, because you may hear us be a little discombobulated, because we just
more than usual.
Yes,
yeah.
I didn't want to cut him off in some of his
right.
discussions.
We just let him go.
In doing that, sometimes you'll hear the interview end at a point in time, and then us come in and talk about it, and or you'll hear it in the middle of an idea. We'll go to a commercial and come back, and I'll rerun some of that. But that's what we're doing on Everything Old Is New Again with Dr. Peter Weller. How do you think it's going so far?
I think it's going great. He's a very interesting guy. Don't you agree?
Yes, he has a lot to say about almost everything.
He's very well read, apparently. He's lived a very, as they say, long and fruitful life. And you could basically, I think, ask him any question in the world, and he'll know about it.
And it's not just a goof. Like some people, in a parties, they act like they know everything.
BS their way through
He'll
it, right?
talk about it, then he'll talk about where he got the information from this particular person, famous person, or this not famous, but legitimate source from school or whatever it might have been when he went to. I saw him at a Star Trek convention, and the place was like half empty, and he started talking, like the hall where he was talking, and people started hearing this, and it became full like 10 minutes into his conversation, because he's
a good storyteller too. That's really what draws your attention.
Exactly. So let's get back into it again now. We're going to talk to Dr. Weller and have some fun with Peter Weller.
What's he doing talking to us? That's the part I don't get. But
from RoboCop. Here we go. Just wanted to pick up on that. So he holds quite some power by being someone that obviously can supply food to the survivors.
Yes, he's not only we need the seeds. The whole plot of this season is that the seeds themselves are the things which are going to generate food for the world. But how to generate it with these seeds is Velek, and Velek wants the seeds. And so the seeds are sort of the MacGuffin, if you will, to use Hitchcock's term, about the item that everybody is pursuing, and it becomes the signature of good versus evil. So Velek needs the seeds in order to, in his vision, feed the entire world, and all peoples of all cultures, as he says, can face any challenge of a dynamic planet if you only listen to me. And it started, on the comic side of it, we're talking about interesting men before. One of my mentors, and a guy who wrote one of the guys who wrote my recommendation into grad school was Gore Vidal, the great Gore Vidal. And whether or not you agreed with all of Gore Vidal's politics, which I didn't, you have to admit that this guy's one of the greatest social essayists of the Western world, since H.L. Mencken or Ben Franklin, for crying out loud. And he would say this, also is funny dude. And, and he would say this, man, he would put me in hysterics. He said, listen, there's not a thing wrong with the world if everybody will do exactly as I say.
And that's the character that you kind of do play.
That's right. That's Paul Velek, and whenever I'm playing a guy, I harken back to Gore, And I was with Gore one time. He was like, I was watching him give some political rap, and he said, listen, and they were asking him about what are the future of, I think it was Clinton's problems with Monica, I don't know what it was. But and Gore said, well, listen, unless I'm wrong, and I never have been. And then he went on to see his thing, man. And they said, only for somebody with like his sense of humor, I guess his irony, could say stuff like that, and people would laugh.
Didn't he used to debate William F. Buckley on television? Was that
well,
him?
Now there's a great documentary out about that. I was a kid. I was watching the Days of Rage and the Chicago debates. I watched it live with I think it was Howard K. Smith, Harry Reason, Howard K. Smith. I think. I watched him debate Buckley. I was appalled. I mean, I was astounded that one of them said, he called him a crypto-fascist. The other guy called him a goddamn queer.
Right.
And that was on TV live, man, in 1968. Was something. Bro.
Yeah,
and now I think they got a documentary out now about the Buckley Vidal debate.
You could just replay those debates, portions of them alone, and forget the documentary. And I'm sure that the documentary just will elevate that to explain what's going on behind the scenes and all that. But that's a great topic unto itself. First section down. Thank you so much. Everything going okay?
Yeah. Good. And I might the last ship, thanks to TNT, is produced and created by Stephen Kane and Hank Steinberg, two great guys. It stars the beautiful Eric Dane. And you talk about a guy who's a stud, and he's also beautiful. You kind of look at Eric Dane and go, I hate you.
If you're...
They call him in Grey's Anatomy, they call him McDreamy or McSteamy.
I was going to say, that's how I get my wife to watch the show, you see.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know. I mean, chicks like to watch the. And then it's got the great Adam Baldwin in it too, and some other wonderful people in it. So it's a great show.
Yes.
I'm happy to be in it. Very grateful to be in it.
Great stuff.
Listen, you were talking about everything as old is new. You know, it's interesting because I teach Renaissance Italian art history. I teach a master's program at film at UCLA, and it's to juggle the intelligence of youth. I'm not talking about there's certain parts of youth that is always left behind because they're not interested. But to shake up youth and realize that you're standing on a campus at UCLA or Syracuse or wherever, North Texas, the places I went, and you say, look, in the 60s, two guys debated on television while college kids were rioting.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You people were rioting. Right. And whether you think that's right or wrong, it's one of the manifestations of democracy. And you guys ought to be, grateful that can happen. No matter if you like Trump, don't like Trump, like Hillary, don't like Hillary, whatever you're looking now, 40, 50 years ago, there was a social revolution going on in the West. And it didn't matter whether you think that's right or wrong. It's democracy that let it happen. In a lot of places, you'd be shot dead. That would have been put down.
Right. If you look at the campus,
like that.
Right, you look at campuses now, they shut that down and don't want to hear and walk out during, the one person's point of view that they don't like. I mean, it's not learning from the past, and it's going to cause, probably cause some trouble in their maturation process. That's just my thought. I don't know.
I totally agree with you. I mean, the thing is that the 60s, I go like, I think these kids, I said, listen, I'm talking to guys, but part of my milieu as a jazz musician is a guy who's 30 years old and a tenor player, went to the same school I did, a great school, North Texas State, one of the first schools to ever give a degree in it. And he said, I saw this movie with Robert Redford called, The Company You Keep, and it's about a revolution, and he's an aging weatherman. And this guy didn't know anything about that. He didn't know there was a revolution. He didn't know there was Weatherman, SDS, Afro-American Student Union, the American Indian movement, the women's, the first wave for feminism, Stonewall. Knew nothing. I saw it that my wife just sort of held her head and walked away because she knew I was going to give him a whole ton of crap.
Yeah.
And I said, David, the music you dig, man. If you're talking about anything from, all the stuff that's in rock and jazz and funk and whatever now, rap is generated out of the cutting edge of music, which is the 60s. And the 60s came about with music because it was in a social revolution. I mean, every single month in the 60s, you didn't have, The Who, Jimi Hendrix, Cream, you had Coltrane, Miles. If you didn't have Otis, Aretha, whatever, you had like Weather Report, it just was on and on and on. Led Zeppelin, Bob Dylan, every single month there was something coming out. There was Frank Zappa. I said, all this music, David, all the music you dig came out of that stuff that Redford is talking about, in the past. And so it's like I'm a little bit appalled. And like Simon Wiesenthal said, if you marginalize the past, you're doomed to repeat it. The great Wiesenthal said that, and I tend to agree. Like, if you're not like picking up a book or have some curiosity about, wait a minute, how did this come about,
right.
Man?
And that's what we try to do, and we're gonna, if you don't mind, we'll hit that again in another part, real quick. But I agree with 100%. The idea, the last point on that for me is just is not just not that you just don't know, but you don't care to know. I'll leave it there, and it drives me crazy. So that's what we're trying to change, just on the pop culture side of things. We'll be back on Everything Old is New again with Peter Weller and discuss more with the most interesting man in the world on Everything Old is New again.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
This is Terrence Winter, writer and executive producer of The Sopranos, creator and executive producer of Boardwalk Empire and The New Vinyl on HBO. And you're listening to my friends Douglas Viviani and David Cohen on Everything Old is New Again.
And welcome back. We are enjoying a conversation with Peter Weller, and we're going to dive into a little question here that's going to I don't know, may rack your brain a little bit, Peter. Almost from the start, 1977, Lou Grant's show. Remember that? Ed Asner's Lou Grant. You played an American Nazi, neo-Nazi leader that when he found out that he had Jewish blood, committed suicide. I know that's obscure, but that was your first, I think, your first TV role, or no?
Yeah, it was. It was the first major role.
Right.
It's interesting that the father of Maggie and Jake Gyllenhaal, Stephen Gyllenhaal, director, just ran into him yesterday because he's got a young kid, and I got a 5-year-old, and he wants to put his kid into this preschool. And I hadn't seen him in 30 years. But he's the guy that directed me in the first thing I ever did, which was before the Lou Grant. But the Lou Grant, listen, it's very important. Showtime made a film about that guy. And then they made another movie about it. They keep making a movie about that guy. It's not that the guy found out he had Jewish blood. The guy was raised in a traditional, is not Orthodox family. And for some reason, this is the truth part of it, the true part of it. And Alan Burns and Gene Reynolds just seized on the truth of it and made that Lou Grant episode. But the real guy worked for George Lincoln Rockwell, the head of the Nazi American Party in the 60s. And in about a week before he was graduated from high school, he was beat up, ostensibly because he was Jewish, and ostensibly because he was Orthodox, and he was wearing the tallis and everything else. So when he was beat up, he disappeared. And he was essentially raised by his grandparents. He disappears and then resurfaces as a whole nother dude 8 years later as head of the neo-Nazi American Party in New York State. And I think it was a science editor, because my research is failing me now, but I researched it at the Public Library at Fifth Avenue when they offered me that. And my agent, Rick Nacito, just retired from the management business, and now he produces for Pacino and Mel Gibson, a lot of other people. And he's my oldest friend. But he just said, Gene Burns and Alan Burns and Gene Reynolds, the creator of Married to Tyler Moore, have offered you sight unseen, because they saw you and Mike Nichols play Streamers, which is undone. They don't offer a one-off guest star to fly out from New York to do this thing in California. And I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do television on one-off guests. I think you might want to look at it because it's in your strike zone. It's a true story uncovered by the New York Times, and they're sort of indemnifying the thing, a little bit fiction, on Lou Grant. So I go to the New York Public Library at Fifth Avenue, man, and I look it up. And I go, oh, my God, man, this science editor, some guy who's investigating the neo-Nazi American Party in 1969, comes up on the fact that this kid, and he tries to do, nowadays you could Google a dude and find out where he's from. But he does the backstory, the lineage, and finds out this kid's the grandson of an Orthodox Jewish family and a rabbi, blah, blah, blah. And what's he doing? And that is an astounding thing, because the psychology of a kid who all of a sudden flips the other way. It's not the first time whereby somebody says, you know what, I'm a victim. I'm a total victim. As an Orthodox Jew, I want to be the victimizer. I want to be the winner in this. It's a Colonel Kurtz thing. It's a total Apocalypse Now.
Absolutely.
I saw them, and I realized, we could not beat them, that they could cut off all the arms and throw them in a pile, that great Brando speech.
Right.
And that's like a piece of psychology, of social psychology, that astounds me to this day. Mm-hmm. How does the humanity in somebody die off such that they can then murder? How can Robespierre, who essentially wrote the book on reactionary terror, and by the way, everybody since then's read it, from Goebbels, Hitler, Pol Pot, all the way up to ISIS, has read that tract on terror. If the bourgeoisie will not participate, we have to terrorize them out of their apartments. And if that means killing them in front of each other, that's what we have to do. That's written in 1793, man, by a dude in the French Revolution. Okay, 4 years before that, he's the champion against capital punishment. He's the guy saying nobody has the right to take a life. It's only God that does, that everybody has the rights under the law. What happened to that cat? What happened to that guy, in the Lou Grant thing? What happens to the moderate who becomes like the assassin? It's an astounding thing. But I harken back to Wiesenthal, man. If you visit the national, the world Holocaust Museum in D.C., that he says, listen, you can't marginalize this stuff. You can't go like ISIS is a fluke. Just kill them off and not pay attention. You can't go like Goebbels and Hitler and the Wehrmacht to like, that's an anomaly. No, man, that's part of us. That's us. Those aren't like freaky rednecks out there. Those are generated out of our particular process, and we better be paying them attention, man, or it happens again and again and again. And then we throw up our hands and go, how did it happen? How did it happen?
Well, again, we talk about everything old is new again. If you don't look in the past and study it, you're going to have some problems. But I want to just talk about the idea that all of
that's why I'm doing your show, because when I saw the title of it, I said, this is a platform, man. So.
Oh, I love it. That's tremendous. I appreciate that. And you're adding a lot to it. And I want to just tell the audience, give an idea that these are the thoughts, many of the thoughts that you, I think, have before you select projects. And I want to bear with me a couple of seconds here. I want to set something up. And I know you took this for a personal reason, this Fringe episode called White Tulip. But for those who haven't seen it, just give me a second to set that up, is that you play a time traveler that goes back in time step by step, and each time you do so, there's a significant level of death around you as a result of you, the character, going back in time. It seems to be a horrible choice. You're going back, it seems like you have no soul, no spirituality. However, you're going back in time to really find out and see your fiance who died in a car accident. And the kicker is that when you go back, I'm going to have to ruin the ending. If you haven't seen it already, feel free. But when you go back in time, you finally get there. You're not going back to save her. You're going back, this character, to die with her, a true act of love. Do you feel that was something that was realistic, that was something that resonated? It did for me. I understand that. And just to follow that up, because I know you'll have a tremendous answer on this, the question is, he also, as a side note, he has a character that's trying to stop him, and he meets this character who's losing his faith in God and spirituality, and he does an altruistic act by going ahead and writing a white tulip and on a card, sending it to this individual, making plans to send it to this individual when he's gone, that will then aspire, for certain reasons, this character to have faith or reestablish his faith in spirituality. So that's a positive thing, again, that this person does that on the face of it is an evil person or doing an evil act. Would you care to follow that up in any way?
No. Listen. That's a pivotal thing I ever did. I had an argument with my wife in the car when we're going to register. I didn't know what register was. I'd never been married, and the quick backstory is that it was a Catholic wedding we were having in a town that we live in Italy. I was filled with bureaucracy for 1 year. I said, honey, I do not want to hear about flowers, tables, silverware, disco music, veils. I don't want to hear any of it. And so we give all our money to the school in this village. And really quickly, about a month, 2 months before we had to leave to go do something for the History Channel, she said, listen, the older people, your parents' friends, my parents' friends, they don't want to give money to school. They want us to buy something. So you have to go register. I said, what is that? She said, we have to go to this glass store. I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So we go to this glass store, 3 hours in this glass store. I want to murder everybody in it, stab myself with a fork, break every glass. I'm standing around like my life is going out of my ears. And I have a freak out in the car because the next thing we got to go to Neiman Marcus. And I think, I go, this is not the deal, not the deal.
I'm sorry. We're going to have to cut for a moment here and take a break in this story. We'll be back right after this word from our sponsor with Peter Weller to find out why he did this Fringe episode and more. Everything old is new again.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
We're back with Peter Weller on Everything Old is New Again, talking Fringe. What do you say, Peter?
Anyway, after that, everything was great because my mother-in-law, who's really smart, told her daughter, now my beautiful wife, said, honey, you don't take men shopping. You don't. I mean, unless they're born shoppers, you don't. Because they revert to 4-year-olds in a grocery store throwing soup cans, or driving the carts into the walls, So don't take a guy to register, which is a great lesson for anybody out there who's going to get married. But cut to, years later, I meet J.J. Abrams by a fluke because I'm at Bad Robot applying for work as director for Alcatraz, one of his shows. I'm getting in the car, a guy says hello, Peter, and I turn around and see this guy with glasses and a baseball cap. He says, I'm JJ. And I tell him this story about White Tulip, because the White Tulip stories that I got offered this thing, a one-off again, like I don't do one-offs. I trashed it. I come home, I find my wife weeping. I have to prepare for my PhD written exams. I said, Ivani, you're not really sitting on a couch at my office weeping, reading a piece of episodic television. Right. Really? And she says, no, it's about a guy. It's all about that stuff you like. He's trying to go back in time, and he kills people, but every time he comes back, he doesn't kill them. And then he has a conversation about God and science, all that stuff that I don't understand, that you like, that Einstein said. And I said, okay, but why are you crying? She says, because he's trying to go back in time, like to save his wife, because they had a fight in the car on the way to register. And I go, what? No. And I take this thing, I sit down, and Douglas and David, I tell you, I read it. And when I get to the end, yeah, it does have a 4-page scene with me and John, what's his name, that great actor who's in,
Fringe, yeah.
Lord of the Rings, yeah.
Yes.
And, yeah, it is about spirituality. It is about loss of faith. And it is about his fear that his son is, like, playing too much on the science side and not enough on the faith side. And, yes, it is about a guy going back in time, and you think he's going back in time to try to save his fiancée, and John says to me, you can't do that. People die on God's time. You can't resurrect the dead. It's a beautiful, beautiful stuff, man. The polemic that people have talked, about ever since Plato, for crying out loud, or earlier, maybe the Egyptians. And so at the end, he gets in the car, and you realize he's not going back to save her at all. He's going back to die with her. And the last words he says, I love you. So I'm reading this thing, man, and I collapse in weepy, tearful teenage oblivion, soap opera, Warm and Fuzzy, which I can't stand. And I'm crying in my office, and I said, I got to do this. And then I meet JJ in the parking lot. I tell him the story I just told you, man, from the whole thing about the argument with my fiancée down to the whole thing, reading it. And, I had to do it, man. So, look, man, those things hit you. And like Joseph Campbell said it, this is really Warm and Fuzzy. When myths and all that stuff and coincidences that are like beyond your conception mirror your life, this is not, most people sadly in the West go, oh, you know what happened to me? Just like it was like they said in Ulysses or something, or just like, the Trojan War or whatever. And Campbell said, seize that, because that's a sort of a conscious stream, a stream of consciousness from oral tradition that's catching up with you and guiding you, and don't just discard it. So when that thing happened, that's powerful stuff, man. It's powerful stuff to have an argument with your fiancé and then pick up a script, and it's everything that you really have been invested in, God versus science, or science and God, and it's all centered around having a fight with your fiancé, man.
Right, to get your attention, so to speak. That was the attention getter in the cosmic scheme of it, but you act, because that was in your garbage can in your office, the script, right? And you pulled it out.
It was in my garbage can, man.
Yeah. And
it was going to go away. And what would have my wife, what would lead my wife to go, oh, what's that script in the garbage can? There's tons of scripts in my garbage can.
Right. So there's, everything for a reason, I guess you could say, or some things for a reason. And as long as you're attuned to listening to that and saying to yourself, wait a minute, what the heck? I gotta listen to what whatever that is telling me to do, right?
Yes, you got to listen to the sirens. Look, man, you want to go back in whatever the two cultures that gave us everything in the Western world, the Jews and the Greeks. The Greeks had like a particular universal idea of destiny, right? And the early Israelites of Judaism gave us a choice. In this destiny, you can alter it. Abraham didn't have to leave Mesopotamia. He was a made guy. He's hearing a voice. What voice? The voice of the corn, the southwest wind? What is it? No, it's a voice inside me. It's a true voice. It's a voice coming from infinity or cosmos, man. It's telling me to go. Okay, so that gives us that. But at the same time, you got Plato on the other side saying, listen, man, there's something that's going to lead you. It's not just your voice. It's a world out there. And so you got to pay attention to both of them. And, you got to get the alien off your face, pay attention to the universe. I mean, that's my daily deal. I got to get up, meditate, have a little prayer. You know, God lead me, and let me avail myself of the opportunity. Otherwise, man, I never get out of my room.
But you got to be able to listen and hear it, and that's what you know what I mean. Like people sometimes don't attune themselves to that. You got to.
We don't because we're too manifest. We're too obsessed with our own little 2-foot world. But me too, man. I'm not gifted in that respect. I have to ask the cosmos, infinity, God, whatever, daily, to open up my brain and my eyes to some sort of compassion or some sort of like significance. Otherwise, man, you know, I just play, you know, Pac-Man or sit on my computer, you know, or like and not move.
Totally understand.
Like everybody else, we're all the same. We're all inertia driven.
Kindred spirits here, and everything old is new again. Again, we're with the we'll put it in quotes, the most interesting man in the world, because Peter Weller himself can challenge that gentleman for that. Or maybe he'll challenge me for that title. But we're here with David Cohen as well. I wanted to dive into the idea that if you didn't know it already, we're really actually talking to a doctor, right? Let's be honest. You should be. I know you don't have that kind of a persona, I don't think, but I want to call you doctor at this point.
Yeah, please do call me doctor, because Dwight Yoakam, I received my PhD when I was directing Dwight Yoakam on Under the Dome. And when Dwight Yoakam, bless his heart, he was a great guy, and my wife thinks he's the sexiest dude on earth. When he found out I'd just been awarded my PhD with the internet, I jumped up and down. He says, "What's up?" I said, "I just got awarded my doctorate." And he stood up and made this speech, like in front of the crew, and I thought he was just sort of like lauding me for fun. But the guy was like astounded that I sort of astounded that I got a PhD, and he said, and so my wife told me that I could correct everybody for 6 months, and Dwight said, "No, it took you 10 years. You have to correct everybody for 5. When you meet them and they call you Mister, you must insist that they call you Doctor. You must stand for this in the world of academia." He says, "I'm so envious." So on behalf of Dwight, you know, I hear Dwight, I'm looking at him, and the guy's dead serious and truly invested in me being a doctor. So I invoked Dwight Yoakam. Yeah, it's great to call me doctor. Now I correct everybody calls me Mr.
Perfect. And from one doctor to the other, because I have a JD. I'm an attorney by profession
You do?
as well. So yes, that's
you're a doctor. Doctor jurisprudence, man. Very great.
So we can call each other doctor for the rest of the interview. And anyway, long story short, and I joke around, but it is significant and serious, an adventure that you went down to get a master's in Roman Renaissance art when a time in your career that I would suggest is kind of at the high point. You're doing very well in the, let's say, what was it, around 210 to 214, somewhere around that age, 214, you got it. So, I mean, you tell me, what inspires someone to change, I'm not going to say change career, but to add on this extra burden, this extra adventure to your life beyond acting and directing to do this, which is not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not an easy thing to do. It had a momentum of its own. Like I was saying, when I was younger, and it started off, Ali McGraw, who was going for a master's degree at Wellesley in art design, and became, like, people forget that she was a stylist in New York with some very famous photographers, Sokolsky and other people, before she ever became an actress or model. She's like, when I was going out with her in the late 70s, I mean, I was the caboose at the end of her train, because every night was a party with artists, you know, art historians, the dozens and the mockers of the Metropolitan, of MoMA, of museums. You know, every single night was with these people.
We'll be back next week with Peter Weller on Everything Old is New Again.